Some men hunt treasure. Gold, jewels, the lost secrets of drowned empires. Others hunt power, collecting ships and men as if they were pieces on a chessboard. Captain Valerius Thorne did not hunt any of those things. He hunted a ghost named Admiral Gideon Blackwood. In the orderly world of the Imperial Navy, Admiral Blackwood was a god of bronze and steel, a man forged by discipline, whose will was as unyielding as the tide. His ships were the fastest, his cannons the most precise, his reputation immaculate. He was the wall against chaos, the embodiment of law in a lawless world. And for a decade, he was haunted by a specter he himself created, a pirate known only as Viper Thorne. Thorne was not a common pirate. His attacks were not random. They were surgical, personal, designed not for profit, but for pain. He sank Blackwood's cargo ships, but left the gold to the fish. He intercepted the admiral's messengers, but burned the orders instead of reading them. Every move was a needle prick, a venomous whisper into the ear of the great admiral, a reminder of an ancient sin the world had forgotten. But Thorne never forgave. He was waging war not against the Empire, but against one single man. And he knew that to break a man like Blackwood, you don't attack his fleet. You attack his heart. Admiral Gideon Blackwood had only one heart, and it had a name, Evangeline. Aboard the flagship, the Invictus, Evangeline Blackwood's life was a reflection of her father's, a symphony of order and precision. She was not a ballroom lady who busied herself with embroidery and gossip. She had been raised under the shadow of the mainmast, her mind sharpened on tides of strategy and tactics. Her father did not see her as a daughter to be protected, but as a prodigy to be shaped. Her childhood games were not dolls, but chess pieces sliding across polished mahogany, while her father taught her openings, gambits, and sacrifices. She loved her father with a fierce, silent devotion. She respected his strength, his brilliant mind. But sometimes, in the quiet of her luxurious cabin, surrounded by books and maps, she felt like one of his navigation instruments, perfectly calibrated, immensely valuable, and locked inside a velvet box. She longed for the disorder of life, the unpredictability of a storm, for something that could not be calculated or foreseen. She did not know she was about to have that wish granted in the most terrible way possible. The attack came out of nowhere, on a day of scorching sun when the sea was calm as glass. Thorne's ship, the Widowmaker, looked like no other pirate vessel. It was a black sloop, long and low, built for speed, not battle. It didn't approach with blazing cannons, but like a viper gliding through water, using a hidden cove to ambush the Invictus as it passed through a narrow channel. Chaos was instantaneous. Harpoons with ropes shot from the shadows, burying into the flagship's wood. In seconds, both ships were hitched together, and Thorne's men, silent and deadly, stormed the deck. It wasn't a battle. It was surgery. They didn't fight the main crew. They created a distraction, an explosion of smoke and fire near the bow, while a small elite group headed toward a single target, the Admiral's cabin. Where Evangeline was, Evangeline didn't scream. Fear was an emotion her father had taught her to suffocate. When her cabin door was broken open, she was standing beside the chessboard, an ivory queen in her hand. The man who entered first was tall, wrapped in black leather and in the aura of the storm itself. His face was a mask of sharp features and cruel indifference, except for his eyes. His eyes burned with a cold intensity, the color of a winter sea, and they were locked on her. "Captain Thorne, I presume," she said, her voice steady though her heart hammered. A corner of his mouth curved, not a smile, something more dangerous. "The Admiral taught good manners to his property," he said, voice a low growl. He stepped closer, the scent of salt, smoke, and danger enclosing her. His eyes passed over her, not the way a man looks at a woman, but the way a collector looks at a rare piece he finally acquired. My father will see you hanging from the highest gallows in the Empire, she spat, defiance sparking in her gaze. No, Thorne said, stopping right in front of her. He won't, because he is a man of order, and he knows a king must never be separated from his most valuable prize. He took the ivory queen from her hand, his fingers brushing hers. The jolt that went through her surprised her. And you, Miss Blackwood, he whispered, are the prize. He seized her, not with brutality, but with undeniable force. She struggled, but it was like fighting stone itself. He threw her over his shoulder, as if she weighed nothing, and carried her out into the chaos of the deck. The last thing she saw was her father's face, breaking through the smoke, his mask of composure finally shattered by pure horror and helplessness. And she saw Thorne smile at that sight. And she understood. She was not the goal. Her father's pain was. He took her to his ship, cut the ropes, and vanished back into the cove before the Invictus crew could even begin a counterattack. It all happened in under 10 minutes dot as the Widowmaker sailed into open sea. Leaving the mighty flagship behind, Thorne threw her onto the floor of his own cabin. It was Spartan, functional, the opposite of hers. He locked her inside. For hours, she sat in the dark, listening to the ship's groan, feeling every wave taking her further from everything she knew. The initial shock gave way to a cold fury. She was not a chess piece. She was not a prize. She was a Blackwood. And she swore to herself, in that moment, that this pirate captain would bitterly regret the day he mistook her for a defenseless queen. The game was on. He had made his opening move, capturing his enemy's most important piece. But he had underestimated his opponent. He thought he had cornered her. He did not realize he had invited her into his own home, into the center of his own world. He wanted her as a weapon to use against her father. He had no idea that the most dangerous weapon on the ship was now locked inside his own cabin, studying his moves, waiting for the chance to flip the board. He saw her as his triumph, but she was destined to become his ruin, the daughter of his greatest enemy, his greatest prize, and his greatest and only weakness. Evangeline's first days in captivity were a lesson in psychological warfare. Thorne did not mistreat her nor threaten her. He ignored her. He left her locked in the darkness of her cabin, with nothing but her own thoughts and the ship's relentless motion. Food was pushed through a slit in the door. Silence was his weapon, designed to break her spirit, to reduce her into fear and dependency. But he underestimated the discipline Gideon Blackwood had forged in his daughter. Evangeline did not scream, did not cry, did not beg. She waited. She listened. She learned the rhythms of the ship, the guard rotations, the calls for meals, the voice of every man who passed by her door. Her prison became her field of observation. On the fourth day, he finally opened the door. The sunlight blinded her for a moment. He stood there, a dark silhouette against the light, his face expressionless. "You won't break so easily, will you?" he said, more like an observation to himself than a question to her. "You'll have to do much more than lock me in a room to break me." "Captain," she responded, voice hoarse but firm. He smiled slightly, a flicker of reluctant respect in his eyes. "Good," he said. "That makes the game more interesting." He took her out of the cabin. "You're no longer a prisoner. You're my guest, with one condition. One move to escape, one signal to a passing ship, one misplaced word to my crew, and I'll return you to the darkness, permanently." Thus began their chess game. He gave her limited freedom on the ship, but kept her under constant observation. She was forced to take her meals with him in his cabin, under his sharp eyes. Their conversations were not friendly. They were duels. Every sentence was a test, every question a trap. He tried to extract information about her father's weaknesses, his routines, his fears. She, in turn, countered with questions about him, trying to pierce his shell of cynicism, trying to understand the source of his hatred. "Why do you hate him so much?" she asked one night, over a map of the Caribbean. "What did my father do to deserve such personal vengeance?" Thorne's expression closed, coldness returning to his eyes. "Your father is a man who builds his legacy on the graves of better men," he said, voice low and dripping venom. "He takes what he wants, no matter the cost to others." "I thought he had taught you that." "He taught me about honor," she shot back. "Something a pirate like you wouldn't understand." "Honor?" He laughed, joyless. "Your father's honor is a cloak he wears to hide the rot underneath. You see the bronze god. I see the man he used to be, the man who destroyed my family for a handful of silver coins." The revelation shocked her into silence. This was not about piracy. This was about something ancient, a wound that never healed. She began to realize that the monster before her was not born. He was made. And her father, the hero of her world, was the creator. As their battle of wills unfolded in the cabin, Evangeline's presence on the ship started causing ripples. The crew, superstitious and brutal men, did not know what to do with her. She was not a tearful prisoner, nor a frightened woman. She walked the deck with her chin high, the posture of an admiral, not a captive. They called her the Admiral's Princess, a nickname whispered with a mix of mockery and growing fear. They saw how the captain watched her. His obsession was palpable, and that made them nervous. An obsessed captain was a distracted captain, and a distracted captain led a crew straight to the gallows. Thorne's change was subtle, but undeniable. The habitual cruelty that defined his command began to diminish. Once, when a young cabin boy dropped a barrel of gunpowder, a mistake that normally would have cost him 10 lashes, Thorne simply stared at him. His eyes instinctively moved to Evangeline, who watched from the railing, her expression tense. He saw the silent challenge in her gaze, and with a frustrated growl, he merely sent the boy away with a warning. The crew exchanged confused looks. The viper had lost his venom. The turning point came during a storm. Not an ordinary storm, but a monster from the heart of the ocean. The Widowmaker was tossed around like a toy. A massive wave swept across the deck, breaking a rope and sending a loose cannon sliding dangerously across the planks, threatening to crush anything in its path. Evangeline was thrown off her feet, sliding helplessly into the cannon's trajectory. Without a second's hesitation, Thorne moved. He hurled himself across the slippery deck, a blur of black leather and fury, and reached her, pushing her out of the way, just before the cannon passed. He shielded her with his own body, the impact throwing him against the mast. He rose with a groan, his left arm hanging at a wrong angle. It was broken. That night, in the swaying cabin, she found him stubbornly trying to set his own arm. Sweat dripped down his forehead, his face pale from pain. "Let me help," she said softly. "I don't need your help," he growled, pride blinding him. "Don't be foolish," she insisted, voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "You saved my life. Let me repay the debt." Reluctantly, he gave in. The moment her hands touched his skin was electric. She, the daughter of the man he swore to destroy. He, the man who stole her from her life. And there they were, in the lantern-lit quiet of the cabin, united by pain and reluctant respect. With a deep breath, she used the field medicine knowledge her father insisted she learn and, with one swift and painful movement, set his bone back in place. He didn't scream. He only clenched his teeth, eyes closed, vulnerability on his face, something she never thought she'd see. When she was done, he stared at her, breathing hard. The hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by something much more complicated. something that frightened her more than all his rage. "Why?" He whispered. "I am not my father, Thorne," she said. "I don't let good men suffer if I can prevent it. And what if I'm not a good man?" He challenged. "That," she answered, eyes locked with his, "is something you still need to decide." He became her weakness, and to her horror, she realized he was becoming hers as well. She was supposed to hate him. He was her enemy, her captor. But she had seen the man behind the monster, the pain that fueled his vengeance. And instead of hatred, she felt a dangerous compassion, a connection that defied logic, loyalty, everything she knew. The chess game had changed. The pieces were no longer black and white. They were shades of gray. His vengeance, once the scorching sun of his universe, now had an eclipse at its center, her. And she, who should be planning her escape, now found herself looking at her captor and wondering if there was something in him worth saving. Their story, full of unexpected twists, reminds us that the greatest treasures and greatest dangers are often hidden within the human heart. And if you want to continue unraveling these mysteries with us, consider subscribing so you don't miss the climax of this saga. The storm at sea had passed, but a new one, quieter and far more dangerous, was forming inside the captain's cabin. The line between captor and captive had dissolved, leaving behind something neither of them dared to name. Thorne, the man who communicated through orders and violence, now found himself explaining constellations to her on clear nights. Evangeline, the woman who should have been planning her escape, now found herself mending the torn sails of his maps, her knowledge of cartography silently impressing him. They were two enemies in orbit around each other, drawn by a gravity they both fought to deny. He stopped calling her prize. She stopped calling him pirate. They were simply Thorne and Evangeline, two souls floating in a universe of wood and secrets, but the outside world had not forgotten them. Admiral Blackwood was not a man who accepted defeat. His fleet swept across the seas, not in a blind search, but in a strategic hunt. He was not just looking for the Widowmaker, he was herding it. Using his intimate knowledge of Thorne's psyche, he pushed him south, into a maze of volcanic islands known as Sorrow's End. It was the place where, 15 years earlier, the Thorne merchant family had lost everything in an ambush orchestrated by a young, ambitious naval officer named Blackwood. He wasn't just cornering the pirate. He was leading him toward the grave of his past. Thorne, blinded by the new and confusing light in his life, fell into the trap. When the Widowmaker sailed into the Blackwater Bay of Sorrow's End, the obsidian cliffs rose around them like the jaws of a beast. And then, blocking the only escape, the Invictus appeared, its cannons gleaming under the setting sun. The hunt was over. The battle was short and brutal. Thorne was a tactical genius, but Blackwood was playing on a board of his own making. Heavy chains were fired from the cliffs, locking the Widowmaker in place. The flagship drew near, and Imperial sailors stormed the deck. But the fighting stopped almost as fast as it had begun. The crews on both sides, pirates and sailors, stepped back, forming a circle. They knew this wasn't their battle. It was a duel between kings. Admiral Blackwood stepped onto Thorne's deck, his polished armor gleaming, his face a mask of cold contempt. "Valier's Thorne," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "The son of a failed merchant playing pirate. I should have drowned you when I had the chance. You took everything from me, Blackwood," Thorne growled, unsheathing his cutlass, dark and deadly. "My name, my family. I'm going to take your life in return." "You have nothing," the Admiral sneered. And then his eyes moved to Evangeline, standing near the mast, her heart frozen in terror. "Ah, wait. You do have my most valuable possession. A mistake I will correct now." The duel began. Steel against steel. A decade of hatred erupting in every strike. They were equals in skill. Thorne's raw fury against Blackwood's cold precision. But Thorne had one advantage. He was fighting for the vengeance of his soul. He drove the Admiral back, the tip of his blade seeking his enemy's throat. Victory was a breath away, and then Evangeline screamed. "Father!" The sound of her voice, the agony in it, struck Thorne's heart like ice. He hesitated, only for a fraction of a second. He looked at her, and in her pleading eyes, he saw the cost of his vengeance. Killing her father in front of her would shatter her, the way he had once been shattered. And in that moment, he knew he could not do it. She had become his greatest weakness. Blackwood, the relentless strategist, saw the hesitation. He didn't see mercy, he saw weakness. He surged forward, the tip of his blade piercing Thorne's shoulder. Thorne cried out, his cutlass falling from his wounded hand. He was disarmed. Defeated, the Admiral raised his sword for the final strike. "End of the line, boy," he said. "No." Evangeline screamed, and she moved. She didn't run to her father. She didn't run to hide. She ran to Thorne, placing her own body between him and her father's blade. She faced the Admiral, her face wet with tears, but her eyes burning with a strength he had never seen in her. "If you kill him," she said, her voice trembling but unbroken, "you will have to go through me." The world stopped. Gideon Blackwood stared at his daughter, the perfect chess piece he had built, now sacrificing herself for his enemy. And he knew he had lost. Not the battle, but something far more important. He had miscalculated. He had never considered the power of the human heart in his strategy. That moment was all Thorne needed. Seeing her sacrifice, her choice, the vengeance inside him died, replaced by something infinitely more powerful. A love that needed to protect her. With his good hand, he grabbed a dagger from his boot. He did not strike the Admiral. He struck the chains holding his ship captive. With one desperate slash, he severed the main rope. The Widowmaker swung violently, the deck tilting. Blackwood, caught off guard, lost his balance. Thorne rose, the dagger now at the Admiral's throat. The game had flipped one last time. But when he looked into the eyes of the man he had hated all his life, he felt nothing. The fire of vengeance had burned out. He looked at Evangeline, and he knew what he had to do. He lowered the dagger. "You're not worth it," Thorne said, his voice heavy with ancient exhaustion. "Your punishment is to live knowing your own daughter chose a monster over you." He turned to the Invictus crew. "Take your Admiral, and get out of my sea." Stunned, the sailors obeyed. They carried their broken, defeated leader back to their ship and sailed away in silence. On the deck of the Widowmaker, surrounded by blood and wreckage, Thorne and Evangeline stood alone. The hatred that had bound them was gone. The vengeance that fueled him was dead. All that remained was the silent truth between them. He turned to her, his shoulder bleeding, his face a mask of pain and relief. "I can take you to any port," he said, voice rough. "Give you gold. A new life. You are free, Evangeline." He was offering her the world. She looked at his face, at those winter sea eyes now clear for the first time. Then she looked at the horizon, at the endless ocean stretching before them. A future not written on any map. "You took me as your prize, Captain," she said softly. "But a prize sits on a shelf to be admired." She stepped toward him, taking his good hand. "I'm not a prize. I'm your partner." She looked toward the helm of the ship. "Now," she said, a faint smile touching her lips, "show me how to sail us home." And Thorne, the viper, the ghost of the seas, the man who had lost everything, realized that in letting go of vengeance, he had gained the universe. He didn't know where they were going, but for the first time in his life, He wasn't sailing alone, Dot. The revenge story of Captain Thorne had ended. But the legend of Thorne and Evangeline had only just begun.